December.
Yeah.
And if we could do the roll call, please. Ruth, will you handle that? Here.
Commissioner Russell. Here. Supervisor Andrews.
Yes, here.
Mr. Smith. Supervisor Perry. Ms. Wilkinson. Here. Supervisor Marlin. Here. Supervisor Jones. Supervisor Reed.
Here.
Supervisor Rutherford.
Yeah.
Supervisor O'Brien. Supervisor Galloway.
That's it. All right. We'll go to, do everyone needs to participate electronically? Commission. Right, that's that. Go right to matters from the public. Do we have folks here tonight for matters from the public? Do we have anyone online for matters from the public?
Right, one person online.
All right, if you are here to speak, you have 2 minutes to do so. And we will be timing, so we just ask that you keep your comments on time. If you could please state your name, and you're welcome to begin your comments. Sorry, it was muted.
It just changed. There's no public comment.
No public comment. Oh, that was Sandy.
Yeah, she got the wrong phone. We didn't know who it was. It's now Sandy.
Good job, Sandy.
Hi, everyone.
Glad your name's up there now. All right, we'll close matters from the public. And we will go to item number 3, and Christine has some new staff introductions.
We actually have 3 introductions for you guys tonight. First is Otis Collier. Otis Collier is our cigarette tax compliance agent. He is a former City of Charlottesville police officer and has a lot of experience in work-related compliance. We're really excited. You guys have known he's been here for a little while, but this is the first time you've gotten to meet him in person. The next one I'd like to introduce behind me is Lori Jean Talloon. She's going to be working in the Housing and Community Development Grants Manager position. She has managed public health programs and has experience with grant writing, grant implementation, and she'll be working on the home art and housing preservation grant programs. And then behind you, where do you want to say anything? I already asked Otis, he didn't want to, so I'm not neglecting him.
Well, I just want to say hi. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here on the housing team. I love this area. I've been here for over 15 years. And it's really exciting to move into this also. Good to meet you.
And then behind you all is Gorion Gordievsky. Did I say it?
Very close.
Very it's getting closer. That's better. He joined as the body program administrative assistant, working with the body team. He's going to be working primarily with L'Oreal's house on record keeping, invoicing, data management of the body program. He has experience in customer service, project management. He has very strong organizational skills. So we're really excited.
I just want to thank the TJPDC from the bottom of my heart for giving me this opportunity. This is a very important project for broadband, so I'm very glad that I'm working on it and making a positive difference and impact in the development of our communities. It's something that is my passion, so I'm very happy to be working on it.
Welcome to all 3. Appreciate it. And that will take us to item B under presentations, the regional transit governance study.
Hi, I'm Lucinda Shannon. I've been on that meeting before. I work at the TJPDC. This is a presentation about the regional transit governance study that we just started. During this presentation, I'll introduce the project, talk a little bit about the background and goals and our study questions, and talk about our stakeholder engagement and then the expected outcomes for this grant, for this project. Next slide. So I know we've tried it before, but an authority isn't built in months or even years, it's built over decades. So some of the studies we're building on for this are the 2008 Transit Authority study that TJPDC did. And then in 2009, the General Assembly passed enabling legislation to form the Charlottesville Albemarle Regional Transit Authority. However, it was not, it did not provide a funding mechanism for the authority, so it just is there. The RTP was formed in 2017 to help coordinate transit planning, and the Regional Transit Vision Plan finished yesterday. And that plan recommended that we do a governance study, which is this study here. So, so the TJPDC developed with the vision plan. I think most of you have seen this slide, but I wanted to put it in here. The vision plan developed two service scenarios, the unconstrained and constrained scenario, which would substantially increase transit service in the region. I don't know if anybody has any questions about the vision plan. So this study aims to answer the following questions. First, what are the appropriate governance structures to provide the confidence needed for adequate dedicated regional transit funding? How would the structures support regional coordination and planning around transit operations? And how will the structure increase transit investments for the region? The second question is, how can the rural localities participate in the governance structure? And the third question is, what are the most likely sources of funding for the region? How would it be permitted to be used for transit, and how would the funds be allocated? Next. So the study approach, we had a kickoff meeting on November 7th, and we're working on a technical memo, looking at the existing conditions, the baseline of what we have now. And then we're going to do a peer regional transit governance structures technical memo, and provide potential mechanisms for revenue generation, develop a governance structure, and then the consultants will recommend a course of action. Next. So the study is going to have extensive stakeholder engagement to form a consensus for the entire region. We'll be working with representatives from all the jurisdictions in Region 10, plus transit and other partners. Next slide. So the stakeholders, this is an outline of the project. You can see the phases that I introduced a couple slides ago. And underneath on the bottom are all of the meetings and engagement that we plan to do. The project kicked off in October, and it is planned to end in December 2023. Next slide. So in summary, we're going to form a consensus around the most likely funding sources, permitted uses of those sources, and how the funds will be allocated and accounted for. Any questions?
Any questions? Actually, I have one. It may be that we have to do, get the governance study done to answer this question, but if there's any thoughts on it. Has it been discussed or come up about who decides at the end? Because your three big providers, CAT, John, and UTS, are only governed by one of the jurisdictions that sit on the commission. So like Albemarle, for example, CAT's basically a vendor. We can't necessarily say, yeah, we need to lump them under, even if we wanted to. So, you know, I mean, I get that it might say, yeah, you should put authority together, but is it also realizing how the decision gets made?
So we're doing small steps. And the first step is just to get this study, we'll look at just to get revenue in and be accountable for it and have a mechanism for dispersing it. So we won't be managing transit. This project is not going to tell us how to combine them or manage them or anything like that. It's going to get additional revenue, and then it's going to disperse it among the transit providers, and we'll have some more control over it that way. That's just the first step. And then we can work on managing and more coordination among the providers.
But as a part of the looking at the governance study, it'll look at like a board structure for an authority and who would be on the board making the decisions about funding that came in, and that would be based on which localities are interested in participating in that. You know, currently the legislation is Charlottesville Albemarle Transit Authority, but it does have language in it that allows for the rural jurisdictions to be a part of the authority if they selected to be. And so then that board would have to be built out based on who has interest in it, and then you'd have to talk about, like, you know, voting, how many votes you get per jurisdiction. Is it gonna be per capita? Is it gonna be split equally between urban, rural? I mean, all of that has to be talked about and decided as a part of the study. And likely first step is this, and then there's gonna be multiple other steps.
So, at the end of the study, we would be asking the jurisdictions to ask for legislation to pass for additional revenues from the state. So that's kind of the ask that would happen at the end of this. And that's why we're working with mostly the jurisdictions, because they're like the customers of the transit. And then we'll also be working with transit as well. They helped write the scope before.
Thank you.
Two questions. The first one is, so looking at the timeline, I know so kickoff is November, I see now I interpret. So is the plan like a year from now, following December is when this would be finished?
Yeah.
And then the only other question I have is I don't really know how we would do this across multiple jurisdictions, but the state legislative action could obviously be important for funding. Like, is there a way to kind of include more directly, like, state legislators in some ways, since they're obviously the biggest impact over that?
We have our Commonwealth Transportation Board member on our mailing list, and invited. He's coming to the policy board meeting where we'll do a presentation on this as well. So we've been talking with him. What I think we're going to be with quarterly. And then also some of our officials have been in touch with our state representatives and informing them about the process as well. So we will be kind of trying to keep them all in the loop.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Other questions? Very good, thank you. You're gonna be on next, right?
Yeah.
So before I do that, not that you're not welcome to stay, but Christine, do your folks that you intro you to stay?
You guys are all welcome to stay. You're welcome to leave as well.
So I didn't want you to feel like you.
Thank you for saying that, man.
It's always awkward for us. We would love for you to stay. We're gonna need all the houses.
Already started.
Yeah, just here. Very good. So C is the DRPT grant 5310. Loading management. So the Senate got that one as well.
Yeah. So the Section 5310 program is a FTA program that's authorized under the Fixing America's Surface Transportation Act that was passed in 2015. So the Section 5310 grant program supports transportation services for seniors aged 65 and older and people with disabilities. It's a discretionary grant program. DRPT administers the Section 5310 program as the designated recipient for the state. So mobility management builds on the coordination among transportation providers and expands the availability of services for people, for seniors and people with disabilities. So the 5310 program has three goals: increase transportation, improve access to transit, build transportation services for seniors and people with disabilities. After talking with DRPT and grant officers and other stakeholders of the transit providers and human service providers, the TJPDC is proposing to develop and operate a one-stop, one-call center and website for to coordinate transportation information on all travel modes and manage arrangements for customers among supporting programs. I'll get into that more. So it's modeled after the Rappahannock Rapid Regional Commission's Foothill Area Mobility System, which is a mobility management program. And it started as a one-stop information center and referral center, which is similar to what we're looking at doing. DRPT recommended that we implement something similar to our RC's program. And our RRC generously offered to loan us their substantial sophisticated software system for tracking customer interaction and project outcomes. The system will also be able to track unmet rides and identify transportation needs for the region. RRC's mobility manager, who's been super helpful at guiding this through this, will be presenting about their program at December 8th RTP meeting. If anybody's interested in learning more about it, she'll be there. Next. So we're going to start small and grow based on the needs identified by our partners and requests from the community. In the first year, we're going to introduce the concept of human services to the concept of mobility management to the human services network. We'll develop a call center and website to connect people with rides, and we'll identify the areas of need and build partnerships with the community providers. So we're not going to be providing rides or adding new rides at this point. We're just going to be making referrals and working with the transit providers that are in the community. So there's no direct services for TJPDC. So some more startup details here. So the first year budget would be around $150,000. There's a 4% match that TJPDC would cover. It would have a half-time manager for 12 months. So the first 6 months, we would work on starting up the program, getting everything ready, setting up the call center, and hiring a full-time information referral specialist who would work for the second 6 months as a full-time employee. And then there's a lot of opportunities with mobility management. There's a lot of flexibility in the program, and there's a lot of ways to bring in additional money through grants. So we could do things like develop and support new services to address unmet needs, like volunteer driver programs. We could also work with the transit providers to improve services for seniors and people with disabilities. One of the things that mobility management programs do is travel training, where they help people who want to ride the bus learn how to do it, and they'll ride the bus with you and go from your home to your destination and help you learn how to do it. And if some people have difficulty doing it, then they'll hopefully learn keys and ways to overcome these difficulties. Another thing that the mobility management program could do would be to coordinate scheduling and marketing among the transportation providers so that it would be a uniform network from the outside. We'd still have the separate service providers, but it would look like it was a uniform system and easier to use for the customers. And then also we could get grants to start new programs such as taxi and gas vouchers. And that's all I have.
So basically, it came to our attention that there is not going to be a 5310 recipient in our region. So we're not already taking advantage of these funds here. And so we just started to explore and started to reach out to peer agencies. There's one other PDC in the state that does it. They're actually the DRPT recommended we look at their program specifically as one of the better models in the state. Other places that this is done is through the community service boards might receive funding, and they can actually use it for capital, for vans, for rolling stock in order to be able to transport people with disabilities and seniors. What we would like to explore, if we get consensus from you all and you guys are supportive of this, is what that could look like in our region. It would be a really slow startup, like Lucinda said, because the majority of the work I think we would need to do would be looking at where are the gaps, what are the needs, are there services that could be provided that aren't currently provided. I've said to Lucinda, and we talked with our peer PDC, we don't want to be in the service industry. We don't want to be frontline getting on buses necessarily with people. So there's an opportunity for us to contract with existing community agencies where we would receive 5310 funding and pass through to peer agencies that can actually do some of the implementation, where we would be more in a management and facilitation role. So we wanted to throw this out. We've been doing some research. Grant applications are due February 1st. So we would want to hear from you all if it's something you're not interested in us pursuing. But there's, topic for discussion.
Yeah, one of the advantages of being a regional agency and not providing services is that we can develop systems like the taxi voucher program that would work across the entire region and would work across many service providers, and it would be uniform as opposed to having different taxi voucher programs that work different ways for different providers. And then also we can be here as a support and resource for these programs.
Is it limited to, seniors and those with disabilities?
It is, but it could also, additionally, if somebody calls, we're not going to turn them away.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how that would work.
Yeah, we would just count those seniors and people with disabilities. And what we would do to start off with is market to them. We would work with service providers who serve that community and ask them to refer their customers who need rides to the call center.
Questions? Any objection to the TJPDC?
No.
The 4% local match, we would not go to the local governments to provide that. We would use the member per capita assessments that we already received to pay that 4%.
So the gap for the individual is that they would have to call each place to try to get, so this gives them a one-stop.
We would also follow up with the individuals and make sure they got their rides, and if they don't get their rides, we can troubleshoot with the service providers, and then we'll also be documenting that. So at the end of the year, we'll have kind of an idea of what areas need better services, and then we can advocate for them.
Very useful to have that who's not getting to. I mean, it's a good, when would it be up and you said that the grants due by February?
Grants February 1, awards would be July 1, and then we would take about 6 months of planning and relationship building with the service agencies, and then hopefully after the first 6 months of FY24, we would be able to open the lines and have people call in for support.
What's the timeline of microtransit studies, the pilots that are ahead?
The Albemarle Transit expansion.
Okay.
It's supposed to be
Definitely.
kicking off,
So it's gonna be next summer. in
yes,
February.
correct.
So-
Yep, around the July 1 time as well.
So,
I think, for us as staff at the PDC, we felt like this is a resource that hasn't really been utilized, and so we want to explore utilizing it, spend a year building it and see if it's something that is really needed in the community. If it is, then we can continue to grow it. RRRC, Rappahannock Rapidan Regional Commission, is now up to staffing something like 6 positions, and only one of them is housed at the PDC. The rest of them are contracted out to different service agencies, and there's vans, and there's volunteer driver programs, and so they've really built a large program. We would want to see how that works in our area and do it slow and intentional to make sure that we're building a service that's useful.
Is this gone through the transit partnership? They already received info or given an opinion on?
Now, we talked to the transit providers, but I don't think it's been presented to them yet. Yeah, we can bring it to the next meeting. That's a good idea.
Well, I mean, I would see what we should probably get through there. That's makes sense. It stops here first, I suppose.
I just wanted to make sure before we spend a lot of staff time pursuing it, that you guys were supportive of that.
There was no objection, so any other questions? And moving on to D, 2023 General Assembly preview. David, good evening.
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Chairman of the Commission. Just wanted to spend a few minutes to give you a peek at the upcoming General Assembly session. I'm gonna All right. Wanted to touch on a number of things, just kind of talk about the timeline of the session, talk a little bit about budget and potential legislative initiatives, and then finish up with, I guess, my spin on some of the political landscape. So today actually was the deadline for legislators to request drafts of legislation. It will be pre-filed first day of the session. So several of you on the room, localities, and work with your legislators to get those wheels turning. The next thing that happens is 2 weeks from today, when the governor will introduce his proposed amendments to the current biennial budget. The General Assembly then convenes on January the 11th. Legislators will have a crack at introducing their own budget amendments. Once they receive the governor's proposal, they can propose amendments by, I think it's January 13th, the session meetings. You get to crossover day on February 7th. That's when the remaining legislation that's been passed by the House goes to the Senate and vice versa. And then scheduled adjournment February 25th. This is the short session, 46 days. We've had a number of extended sessions and special sessions in recent years. I'm not anticipating that this year because we'll see on the next slide. Actually, at the end, all 140 seats in the General Assembly election this year. So they're going to want to get out of the campaign trail. Looking at the current state budget, it's been in effect since June, but we had that protracted session before they reached the budget agreement this summer. It's about just under $60 billion in general funds for the current biennium. You'll recall that just under $4 billion in tax relief was agreed to by the General Assembly and the governor across the biennium. Big chunks of that were the increase in the standard deduction for income taxes. There was the income tax rebates for individuals and married couples. Had a lot of activity surrounding the grocery tax. Ultimately, the state sales tax on groceries was eliminated. The local sales tax on groceries was reserved. State agencies have gone through a process this fall to funnel up their request for amendments to the existing budget through their secretariat and to the governor. So all that's been taken into consideration into what we'll see from the governor in 2 weeks. All indications are, and this is some information from recent retreats that the House and Senate Money Committees had, that there's going to be just under $3 billion in additional revenues above the current budget amounts over the course of the remaining, 19 months of the biennium. There's also been less demand seen for programs that are required to be funded by the state and those that have historically been high priority spending items for them. For example, Medicaid is one of the biggest drivers of the state budget. I think they're actually anticipating saving money on Medicaid this year. This is not a re-benchmarking year for K-12, so you don't have those education funding costs that you see jump up there every 2 years. So there will be money for another push that the governor is planning to make for additional tax relief. I think there will be some consideration of further increasing the pay raises that were awarded to state and state-supported local employees and school employees for both years of the current biennium. And you can see just a 1 cent pay raise across those 3 major groups of employees is over $100 million. The governor, has indicated, and I think this probably be the things to look out for in his budget amendments. Tax relief, public safety, mental health, and now behavioral health. I think like some of the events of the past couple of weeks in Virginia. I think from the legislative standpoint, they're going to be wanting to be cautious in how they spend additional revenues and make sure that they're not necessarily committing those to ongoing expenses in future bienniums. So maybe looking to make one-time expenditures as much as possible. Next slide, please. Possible legislation, touched on tax issues, tax policy, money being available for additional tax relief, maybe going after that local option sales tax again. I imagine we'll see some efforts to do that, some additional state income tax relief, possibly. I've heard that there may be a proposal to lower the corporate tax rate in Virginia. Another big item that I think we'll see legislatively, it's been hearing about the past couple of weeks, relates to housing affordability. The governor has, made a statement, kind of outlined his Make Virginia Home Housing Plan at the housing conference a couple of weeks ago. I included a write-up about it in the legislative update a couple of weeks ago as well. some things that, appear that we haven't seen the details, to give some concerns to local governments and their role in affordable housing, and possibly putting some restrictions on your local land use and zoning, and maybe also delving into just stormwater regulations as well. So definitely going to be a lot of talk about affordable housing in this session. I'm going to spend a lot of time, I'm sure. And then I think I mentioned this to a number of you all earlier in the fall. We had some discussion about short-term rentals, and though we haven't seen it yet, it's still anticipating that the Airbnb type industries are going to be looking to also restrict local authority that you have now to regulate their industry through local ordinances. Next slide, please. I just wanted to touch on a couple of other little tidbits. I think I've been to 5 of the 6 localities in Charlottesville on Monday to seek approval of the regional legislative program. As I alluded to earlier, we have several of the localities that have their legislative initiatives or budget initiatives that they're working on with their legislators to put forward, and certainly that's always a focus and a priority for me on your behalf as a local level, to try to shepherd those through the process. And then just from a kind of a blanket standpoint of information, during the session, you'll see those legislative newsletters coming out every week, 7 to 8, 9 days or so, and utilizing email communication, other special updates or calls to action as necessary in the session. Next slide. And then finally, here's just kind of what I call the lay of the land, just from a political standpoint. You do have a slim majority in the House. That doesn't add up to 100 because we've had one of the Democratic legislators resign to take a job in the Biden administration. The Senate is 21-18 now. The election of a Republican Virginia Beach area senator to Congress last month. So again, 140 House seats up for grabs in new districts next year. I think that makes for potential for a lot of turnover in the General Assembly. You've got a number of open seats. You've got a number of districts where incumbent legislators are lumped together. So decisions to be made by a number of folks that we'll probably start hearing about toward the end of the session and shortly thereafter. But election year always drives legislation because you look at bills and it's like, what the heck is this? And it's it's a brochure bill, so I'm sure we'll see a lot of that again. It also has some impact on what I call the mood factor. Those that I work with, we always talk about what kind of session it is. The session kind of has its own personality, and usually by the end, we're saying it was a pretty crappy session. Sometimes it's a good session. But just what's the mood of the legislature? What's the mood of the individuals? What's going on between the Democrats and the Republicans? What's going on between the House and the Senate? And that's not atypical, but it does really kind of affect the way things proceed. So, and then I've just put that last bullet in there for headlines because I think you're going to hear a lot of huffing and puffing, in the media, and sound bites from discussion in committees and on the floors of the House and Senate about tax relief, certainly abortion restrictions, and the Supreme Court decision this past summer. Certainly, you always hear about K-12 education. We've had already things in the news about the California emission standards, and then certainly public safety and gun violence will also be a lot of what you hear. There'll be a lot of other things that are going on that you won't necessarily hear about that are going to be more concern and impactful to local governments and the work that you do in your localities. So hopefully I can keep you up to date on that. So I think that's all I have. Yeah, just some these slides, this presentation was in your packet, so some good online resources, the legislative information systems where you can track the bills and the committees. There's a separate page for all the budget activity, and then all the newsletters that I send out to you all and then posted on the legislative page of the TJPDC website. I'd like to take any questions you may have.
I did have one. about the tax relief and the standard deduction. Do you have any idea where that's going? Many, probably even most Virginia taxpayers took a increase in their taxes when the feds upped the standard deduction. Most people are not itemizing anymore. And so the state did raise the standard deduction in Virginia to 9,000 single, 16, 18 joint. Did I say that wrong?
Yeah.
8 and 16.
So not quite a doubling. This is-
Yeah, but they made a fairly substantial increase. It still did not make up for the whole additional tax that many Virginia taxpayers had to pay. Do you know what their plans are? And I do need to point out that the Fed current scheme is only through 2025 unless they extend it. So they may roll it back to something else. They have to take an action.
Yes.
So anyway, do you know what the state legislature, what they're talking about?
I haven't seen any of the specific proposals yet. I would not think that if they're gonna focus on standard deduction, that they make as big a jump in that as they did this past year. And I know there were cognizant of that change in the sixth state. It may be that, you know, you think about, you know, focus of one-time expenditures that, you know, a rebate or a sweeter rebate in this past year might be where they. I haven't seen or heard anything that I would feel confident saying this is what we're going to achieve.
If I recall at the VACO conference presentation there, the animated presentation on the financial thing, I think he did raise what he thought might be the increase to the standard deduction, and it seemed pretty substantial actually.
Okay, yeah.
Because that presentation itself was interesting. They were talking about all the things that we aren't doing and still need to do, but let's give some tax cuts.
Sure.
What affected us most directly in last year's session was the fact the budget went till the final moment to be approved, and that put all of us behind the eight ball trying to figure out what our revenues and costs were going to look like. It sounds like from your presentation, you don't anticipate that happening again. Is that hopeful, or do you still see?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty hopeful since they have an existing budget in place. It's not like they're crafting one for the next biennium, and you know, there's no way they're going to want to be in session in June. So, you know, this is a year. You know, historically, years and years ago, the short session was primarily to come back and tinker with the budget. You know, where revenues and expenditures may need to adjust, and that's all we did. Now it's turned into a full-blown session with 3,000 pieces of legislation in addition to the wholesale budget changes into fewer weeks' time than we do the long session. But that short answer now, I think we would make every effort to get out on time, or you know, if they're close enough to to maybe go a couple of days. But I don't think you're going to see it June this year.
That brings to the consent agenda. 2 items there, the minutes of November 3rd. First, any changes or edits, modifications? And then the monthly financials. Christine, you want to speak to those?
Sure, I can do that quickly. The dashboard and all of the statements are in your packet. Just a couple of high level things. We are still watching our unrestricted cash on hand very closely. We're still at the concern level. We kind of anticipate that now with our larger receivables and our larger expenditures before we can seek reimbursement for our quarterly grants or our larger grants. But paying attention to that very closely. And then October was a very good month for us. We had a net gain of $10,072, which puts us at just over 33,000 net gain for the year. Typically at the PDC, not necessarily last year, but typically at the PDC, we see net losses in December related to taking a holiday and leave time, and in June. But we'll be watching that closely as well to make sure that we're getting towards the end of the year, knowing that we feel confident there's a net gain for the year.
Any questions on the financials?
I do have one comment. The dashboard has been highlighting the reduced amount of cash, which is a little nervous making for management. And I wonder if if it would be informative to make a list of these projects that are paying so slow to us. The expenses we're paying for those projects to contractors as opposed to the staff in the office, and whether something could be done to slow down a little bit paying the contractors, so our incoming cash would match our outgo a little closer. So it might be an illuminating exercise to go through, see if we can change our fact situation.
Yes, and we can share that with you all if that's what you're requesting. We are doing that. So we
Yeah.
are looking at, I mean, there's a specific program, housing preservation grant, where they have several quarters behind in paying us.
Right.
And we have made a decision, we will not do another voucher until we get paid for the ones that we're due. So things like that, decisions on holding off on.
Pointed out that you're pushing on receivables because we can't stand this. And the other thing is if we do have to set up loans and set up a line of credit, which we've been managing not to do, which is a wonderful place to be. We don't want to go there. But if we do, how do we pass those costs on to these projects? That not just the interest, but the setup costs. I remember that TJPDC paid a $5,000, which they didn't know they were paying, but they set up an equity line. It was for Standardsville streetscape project. They set up an equity line to front this money, and then we got stuck with a $5,000 setup charge for that equity line that apparently we didn't know was in there. So, and the organization bit the bullet on that instead of passing it through to Standardsville to use up some of their funds for that. So I'm just saying, if we do have to borrow money, you have to be pretty careful about it and make sure somebody besides us gets stuck paying the cost of borrowing that money. So that's I hope we don't have to, much better not to. But if we can get any of these other ways to handle it, to work out, that'd be much better.
Other questions or comments? All right, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second. Any further discussion?
I have to abstain from the minutes. I wasn't here.
So we can do
I
that.
abstain on this.
Yeah, we're gonna have this, I'll pull back. If we call the motion, we'll do them separate. So we
Motion to approve the minutes. Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
2. This word.
All right, and is there a motion to approve monthly financial reports?
So moved. Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? So we go to new business. We have our 2023 calendar year meeting schedule. We'll just in the packet. Christine, any comments there?
Just noting that we will again not have a July or January meeting, and I did schedule in there this time a extra session for housing preservation grant, since it seems to fall in between when we meet. So that's tentatively on the calendar. And then also, I was curious from you all, it's not something we've done as a practice before, but would you all like in advance a calendar hold for the year? Generally, that's sent out the week before, but if you all would like it a holding on your calendar, I can do that for this next fiscal year.
That's a great.
Yeah, okay. That's all my comments. And again, that's it. If you know, it's a tentative schedule. As things come up, we can move things around as needed.
Now, this gets approved. Do you need us to take action tonight, or this gets approved?
It doesn't get approved,
Or we
or it hasn't
approve the
previously. We
calendar?
can approve it.
So you said in the first meeting of our year, so we approved
Yeah.
the calendar. No resolutions tonight, so that will take us to the executive director's report.
Quick things. I appreciate you all scoring our gingerbread houses. That was a fun team building activity. I know it's a life thing, and we appreciate you guys engaging in that. There are some competitive people in our office that cannot wait to hear the results of your voting, so we will be sure to release those as soon as we can. We're currently in the last round of interviews for the transportation planner. We did have someone that we were interested in that took another job in the private sector and had decided not to go with the public sector. I think that's it on that one, but we are really hopeful that in January we will be fully staffed. And we have some good candidates right now that are going through the process. Virginia Telecommunications Initiative, in the ED report that I gave you, there's some milestones. Some of you, we did the body quarterly stakeholder meeting today with the jurisdictions. There was about 38 people on the call. That was a really good update meeting. I take credit for, our team has gone out into the field several times to look at and make ready work and to look at the parts that we will have to do as staff as far as ensuring that the work is getting done where, you know, it's being reported that it's done. So that's another element of the job. And then the body 2023, so the new application that we put in, applicants should be hearing the 9th on challenge determinations, and then by the end of the calendar year on award notifications. It was very interesting at the Virginia Governor's Housing Conference. There was a panel on broadband and housing, and they did mention the TJPDC specifically because our program goes outside of our own boundaries. So they complemented the coordination that has occurred for it to be 13 jurisdictions. They also shared that the amount of requests they got for this second round are something in the neighborhood of 12-fold for what the funding that they have. So something like 600 million for 50 million available in funding. So it will be a competitive round this go around. That's body. Housing, Virginia Governor's Housing Conference. We had several staff and 2 of our very own chair and vice chair of the Regional Housing Partnership. I encourage you guys to share something, if you will, during your update on that. It was a great opportunity for us to learn together, but also just kind of spend some downtime together as a team. The Virginia Housing Implementation Tier 2 grant. So the Regional Housing Partnership just completed their strategic plan, 5-year strategic plan. There's a grant out of Virginia Housing that allows you to get funding in order to begin implementation of that plan. So the Regional Housing Partnership has been looking at putting out an RFP for a consultant to do some of the work in looking at membership bylaws, you know, whether there should be some sort of membership dues or fee structure to the partnership. And so that's work that we're hoping, they just moved the deadline. We're hoping to get in by December 31st, but they moved it to March on us. And there's other requirements in that application that may make it so that we cannot apply by December. Happy to talk more about that if you guys have questions. Transportation, Title VI, staff has developed a required Title VI plan for the MPO. It is something that we're required to do. We have done a lot of talking about expanding that agency-wide and making sure that we're following Title VI requirements. There is a training that several staff will go to that's being put on by VAMPO on what is Title VI, what are the requirements, how do you implement it as an agency. We will bring a copy. The Title VI plan goes to the MPO. Is it going to the MPO or this meeting? Yeah. Okay, it'll go to the MPO and then we'll bring it back before you guys in February so that you can see it has already been approved by VDOT. So we already have a plan that meets the requirements. Some of these. Economic development for the SEDS, comprehensive economic development strategy that we've been working towards. We did put out an RFP. We received 8 proposals. They were scored and we made a selection of a consultant that'll be doing that work with both our planning district and Region 9. The next steps for that are to be an internal kickoff with the consultants and then start to build the strategy committee that will help with that work throughout the region. I think that's
Questions for Kristen? So that, wow, through the agenda. We will do our round table discussion. Just go down the list. Let's start with the City of Charlottesville. Councilor Payne, you're on the first one. Let's see.
Sure. I guess the past month, the 2 biggest things are the city's search for the next chief of police. This Monday, there was a public forum with finalist candidates hosted by our Police Civilian Oversight Board. And possibly next week, a finalist will be chosen by the city manager, appointed as the next chief of police for the city. Other big thing is our budget process is just beginning. Our planning commission had a work session with city staff. It was the first meeting, overview of the budget. I'm sure like a lot of localities, this year, it sounds like it's really going to be a lot about how do we manage large investments we've already made, given inflation and interest rates. Just one example, you know, affordable housing project we invested in year over year, the cost has gone up around 3%. So it's really going to be about managing the large infrastructure investments we made the past couple of years and making sure that we can continue those. But those two are kind of the biggest things past month.
Thank you, Commissioner Russell.
Yeah.
Who wants to raise their interest?
Well, you're gonna be probably better able to see this. We don't have a lot to pass before, but we do have a meeting very quickly next week with the school board. It'll be very interesting because we're looking at the improvement plan and a lot to work out. So,
Yeah, we have, we only had one meeting between our last report here. And this one I went back on.
only four supervisors.
Four supervisors were there.
We deferred on the one action.
The housing
We
matters, yeah.
talked about actually starting.
And climate action plan was there. We did have the day after our last commission meeting, our meeting with the legislators, which went well. As I would imagine all of you, if you have it, you're getting them on the docket to meet with, get your legislative packets together. And we did get into our 5-year financial plan, which then leads into the CIP conversation we'll be having with our school board. I wanted to point out this Monday at 1 p.m., our Regional Housing Partnerships quarterly meeting is happening there, and Delegate Hudson is our guest that day. So it's going to be a chance for her to speak from the state level about affordable housing. So she was invited about a month or so ago, graciously agreed to do that. So it'll be a typical full partnership meeting. We'll do the business in the meeting, and then she will have the bulk of the time will be devoted to that. So it is available online, just to watch. So if that's something you want to listen into, or you can come that day, we'll be here to attend, especially since affordable housing has been kicked up a notch, if you would, by the governor. I think it's going to be interesting to hear what Delegate Hudson has to say from her perspective on the topic. 1 o'clock Monday, this Monday, yeah. And then, like I said, it's online. We're certainly welcome to attend. And also the housing conference, Supervisor Rutherford, I'm sure he'll make some comments when we move around, but he got to attend for a day as well. This year it was really just attending things. So it's each of us, we were kind of partnering up and going different places to try to spread the ears, if you would, to hear what was having to say, what was being said there. But I thought it was a good session this year. I didn't think, I should have thought to put a report together on the ones that I attended, but I didn't think to do that. So I'm still working on that for my own work. But yeah, outside of, I know that since we took a lighter schedule in November, that we're going to pay for it next Wednesday. We're going to do it pretty late. Probably more to report in February, and we agree for the time we get back, we'll all probably have heard or we're about to hear our respective leaders in our counties giving us our budget presentation for to be over the budget. We're Fluvanna, Supervisor O'Brien.
Not a lot to report, similar to you guys. We had a pretty short meeting last time. We have community meetings for respective industry that is concrete recycling coming up. So we'll have a number of community meetings. The land has already been zoned industrial, but still requires a special use permit. So they're getting out there, letting the community know what they're going to do, and but all the excitement's going on for that, right?
Commissioner Smith.
So other than Jesse wandering around the Virginia Governor's Housing Conference, I got fired. You got fired? Somebody did that? I don't know. It was embarrassing. I had to separate myself from it. To focus on that, much like what Ned said, it's really unique to be there, not as a presenter, and actually have an opportunity to attend sessions and get a lot of learning. I do want to ask David a couple of questions, if that's allowable. So we're putting housing affordability on the state level. Do you think they're going to be as aggressive as the western states? What do you actually think, from your perspective, that they're going to float up to the top on that? I know it's a loaded question, but what do you think?
I don't know what the western states are doing.
So the western states are basically Oregon, Washington, and California. I've said, if you fit the affordable housing model, affordability model, the local jurisdictions will approve. So it's very state, you know, they're not, help me out, home rule states, right? So it's a little bit different, but obviously we're not gonna go that far. I'm confident of that. So what do you think? What do you think's on the table?
Well, I think we need to see what the governor puts out there. I think we also need to see what, kind of budget proposals there are. And I think there's probably, I think going too far is, you're correct. I think there's going to be some pretty good resistance to, stripping local governments of their authority. And that's going to come from different parts of the state and both sides of the aisle. That I think is concerning.
So there's a possibility of growing the existing statute that's on that allows Charlottesville and Albemarle to pretty much do whatever it wants around housing affordability. You think that's going to grow? I'm just trying to figure out.
There's a possibility with those different ordinances. There's been very few attempts at doing that by other localities, and we just got that in Charlottesville. And the home builders have in the past resisted that type of thing, but it may be a new game now, and that may be part of the package. I also hope that the funding is part of the package, because what are the ways to incentivize? Maybe it's adding more to the housing trust fund, or maybe it's.
I'm very curious to see how that plays out on that end of it, and then let me see what else I have on my notes here. City of Charlottesville, how's our rezoning rewrite going?
Hopefully in the next 1 to 2 months max, we're going to get the draft report of the entire zoning rewrite, and then hopefully still be on track sometime for it to be formally approved around this upcoming spring to summer. So hopefully
Extra June would be very good for me personally.
All right.
I've got a mustache bed up, my mustache.
That's I remember that.
So I'm not putting any pressure on it.
We'll aim for early June, but hopefully very shortly.
Late June.
I did just hear, and I don't even have details from staff, that apparently at the next planning commission meeting, which is the 13th, and I miss it, they have to re-advertise the comprehensive plan. I know that, I don't know where that was like.
So that's,
But I don't know.
it's kind of a technicality thing.
Right, but it might mean a long run there. If more-
Yeah, I've got this mustache back, but that doesn't surprise me. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Charles.
The Greene Supervisor Herring.
Well, we had a short meeting. We also had a retreat. So we had a lot of discussion. The main things that we're looking at right now is a salary study. We're doing compression. For example, we got a lot of staff that's starting at 0. And so we're trying to figure out how to work through that. We're also looking at restructuring the reports, who staff report to. Found that our interim county administrator had 16 individual departments to report to that one position. So it's restructuring there. And we're also looking at trying to give the staff a one-time bonus right now to help with the compression salary. So hopefully we'll get that study started soon. And the goal is to have something in place before the next fiscal year. So that would be our biggest budget item. I think I told every department I've talked to, they still do it. I just don't ask for additional staff because right now we're taking care of the current staff we have and deal with that. RSA is still on our dockets and discussion. We're shooting for December. We've had some holdups trying to get staffing. You need to have certified personnel work the water and sewer based on state requirements. So it looks like that we have all but one staff member hired at this point or obligated to come on board. So we're looking at, I've heard January, I'll probably say February is more realistic. So we're very close to coming on the water authority. That's gonna be good and scary at the same time because it's a huge impact financially, but it gives us control of our growth. And we've been fighting this for several years. In my opinion, the reservoir, as most people refer to, a power project should be completed back in 2017. When I say complete, I mean, water, everything else. And we're still fighting and trying to get, out so we can actually do the project. We're doing a county administration search. We followed the same example TJPDC did. So it did very well for us here. That search took place for our director. So we're doing the same approach. We're doing self-advertisement while doing RFP process to save time. We get the first batch of applicants tomorrow. It would be next Wednesday to review those. And our comp plan is projected to come to us for review, I think, in February. So that's pretty much what's going on so far in Greene. Nothing too controversial, not yet anyway. Now that's there's some legal action.
Nice, nice.
I would just mention, I'm really sorry that I missed the bow tie discussion at the last meeting, because we have one on Route 33, it's a smart scale potential project. I have similar angst to what was expressed, but we'll just see, where that goes.
And let's see, we'll go to Louisa, Supervisor Barlow.
We're continuing to try to manage economic growth, trying to attract commercial light industrial, without being continually flooded with residential growth. The short-term rental thing has been kicked down the road, continuing. The James River water line is still waiting on final permits. That seems to be at a standstill. CVAC and Dominion, as far as the internet rollout, they've done a great job. They're complete theirs. REC, on the other hand, is, I think, using the fiber deployment as an excuse to upgrade the infrastructure. And they're claiming they've got to raise their poles and stuff like everywhere as Dominion didn't have to do all that, or CVAC. So they're moving along extremely slow, and hopefully one of these days we'll get fiber in the REC areas that they're, but it doesn't look like it's gonna happen anytime soon.
That's due for Greene. Because that's pretty much all we are.
Well, that's pretty much what we are, but they're putting in poles that are 10, 15, 20 feet high. Then, they're putting in huge nice poles, they're upgrading their lines. And I'm not, maybe Christine can shed some insight on that as far as the white money, but are they able to use that to enhance their infrastructure?
I would say whatever RDC is doing is, their investment.
Yeah, they're not receiving the body funds to do that work.
Good. It's just dragging on and on and on. And it seems like, CVAC and Dominion just roll with theirs. Their areas, they got REC. When we made the announcement, REC stood up, they were the catalyst for the entire thing, which they didn't get on board until the Wednesday before we made the announcement. But now, it doesn't look like they're concerned about whether they get it done or not. One of these days, they're gonna get it.
Has to be a certain amount of clearance between the electric and all that stuff.
Well, I've been looking at the lines that have been put in, and there's not that much difference. Now, it might be a certain amount, but I still don't see that I don't think that's the reason it's not getting done.
We have our meeting with our collective office. Ask them their thoughts on what you're doing.
Good. Start off.
But since we have more residents at Nelson County, we actually have more fiber residents. Second class fiber.
Hey, we have 29.
Yeah.
Break out fiber versus jack. We all have fiber running at 29 core DC, GIC. We're good. It's not accessible quite yet. We got some crunches to do there.
Speaking of staring at Supervisor Rutherford.
I haven't started yet.
That's what I'm saying. Let's hear it.
It was very nice to see you guys at the Governor's Housing Conference. I rode the train in, stayed for some hours, and then rode the train back. And, you know, the internet on the train was okay. That's just my quick review there. It was really good. I know the sessions that I went to, I joined Keith to the zoning one. We went to a zoning one. It's really interesting. The conversations are the same everywhere you go. I think, a lot of the stakeholders today, the conversations we're having on the housing conversation are starting to get even more productive to where it's equaling votes. It's equaling elections and people's, which is now starting to equal policy. I like the correspondence that we heard from the governor referencing the monetary interest. I think there's a potential interest of millions of dollars. Really, we have $1 billion issue, if anything. And I think the zoning piece, at some point, what Keith was going with, and I think that was the question that I asked Virginia Housing to the senator with the Virginia Housing Executive Director was, will there be any move for the state to just green light projects that meet a certain requirement, relative to whatever regulators, not omitting those things, because that's what they're doing in the West Coast states. And you're starting to see that happening in urban suburban areas around, metropolis places. So, yeah, and it's pretty huge. I don't think it's responsible of us to say if. I mean, it's probably realistically when, and how they would implement that. I agree with some of the dialogue that we heard from the Builders Association. There's huge emphasis on Northern Virginia, Hampton Roads, Richmond, and then Charlottesville kind of hits the fourth priority in a lot of the conversations. So I'm sure we will see something of some policy, maybe not this year, maybe not next year, but probably within this governor or the next governor, that's when we're going to start seeing policy. Nelson County related, we've been very busy with the comprehensive plan. Ernie continues to work me very hard. He doubled my pay from 0. So thank you, Ernie. We've had great staff. I can't compliment, the last year transitioning, how great our board has been and how great our staff have been. I think Ernie can attest that we've seen almost not an entire transition, but the changing of rankings all over the place, which led to some new folks coming in and has led into a pay study as well. Ours is still ongoing, right, Ernie? And I have not heard an update really
For a couple months out.
for a couple months. So hopefully we'll get an update on where we're at. And we'd love to share whatever we get. That's pay studies for those, who have participated.
Yeah, we're hoping we're gonna have it before budget time, but
It's not looking promising. And that's been ongoing for, we're going on a year in a few months.
So Savannah's is done, so she reach out to the county administrator.
Okay, yeah, that's a good idea. We'll just take yours and keep it running. It's probably true, you're right.
Yeah, I wish for a regional one.
Well, that's one thing that's always interesting. We always do case studies asking you guys, hey, will you pay people? That's ultimately what ends up being. We could just send an email, we could just send a big email, hey, how much does this person get paid? I don't know, whatever. It's oversimplified things too. Beyond that, I suspect this coming year will be a very exciting year. Do you guys also have a lot of constitutional offices up next year? I know all of ours are up.
1, 2, 3.
So next year will be exciting. We'll see what that means during the budget session. Other than that, I'm trying to think, what fun things do we got?
I'll fill in the gaps.
Yeah, talk about the property, because I've talked about the property for days.
Okay, the Arkin property which the county has purchased, 150 acres, circles north and south of our the high school and middle school. We're moving forward on a hydrologic study because there's a creek called Billy Creek that runs through there that has the potential of expanding the capacity of source code to provide services, which could help us and build out throughout the corridor south of Livingston and in Livingston, and also what we decide to do with property if and when. So that's going forward. There's consensus on the board that we're looking at recreational based development as kind of like the first stage. The scales yet to be determined, but we're moving forward on that, which is great because we'd be sharing services with the community and the school at the same time. So a really big plus for us. If anybody has any experience with shared services with charging stations, we're going to get 2 new electric school buses at the school and charging station as part of that. But I'm wondering about sharing services with the county for fleet or also with community hookups or something like that. If anybody has experience with that, please ring me up. I'd like to know if that's something that people have dealt with in the past or present. Probably present. No one spoke about VACO much.
Oh, yeah.
But one of the
That was like the day before the company.
yeah, the most, I mean, besides having dinner with the staff of TJPDC when we were there, which was very nice. The most interesting thing to me was something that was like really unexpected, which is I'm on the Environment and Agriculture Committee, and VACO is structurally changing that committee and going to make it an agriculture and public lands committee. I'm not sure exactly the terminology, but they're taking the environment, putting it in energy, which I think makes the ag community very happy, but disturbs me immensely because there seems to be more exciting discussion about environmental issues as they relate to agriculture as now to energy, because that's a pretty much, I mean, there's also issues there, but I'm a little concerned with how that got shuffled around, and there's very little discussion about it at the meeting. I'm interested in finding out more about that, because I said one interesting thing that did happen in that committee is that that committee got into the legislative program, which was subsequently approved, to include that there be a request that the county study the long-term positive and negative effects, not actually saying positive and negative, just effects of biosolids application on agricultural and forest holdings. And that concerns me because there's a big biosolid application permit pending in Wilson County. DEQ says that you may request a public hearing, but in the committee, we have a representative from DEQ there. When I asked why those requests for public hearings seem to always get denied, as they have in at least 2 instances that I'm aware of, they said something very strange to me, which continues to bother me. I've had a lot of deals with DEQ, and I know the limits of what they do. But they said that, well, public hearings are good if there's something that you can either change or stop, and of course you can't do those things in this case. And I said, well, aren't public hearings about information and sharing information? The public getting a chance to hear that information and give input. And there wasn't really a DEQ response to that. But we didn't have consensus on our board of supervisors to ask for a public hearing, so I did it myself as the central district supervisor. So I requested a public hearing for the county on the biosolid applications. There's some significant problems with it, not to mention the fact that one of the properties is adjacent to an elementary school, and bioaccumulation, all sorts of things that should concern farmers if they understood what it was. So anyone that has any input on that wants to talk to me about it, I'd be glad to hear, because I know there's like 6,000 acres in Albemarle or something like that, and Alex shared with me. And of course, virtually, all counties are in the James River watershed. And if anything goes wrong, or if there's a a rain event that we weren't planning on, things could go east and south in a really bad way. So anyway, that's a concern that I have. Another thing that people get back to me if they have any input on. My friend's funny. If anybody has any feelings about Longville, Virginia, I'd like to hear them pro or con. There's a special use permit that's coming in front of us in 2 weeks that has an opportunity of extending the reach of Longville in Rockfish Valley. Perhaps significantly, I'm not sure, but it would be worth finding out if there's any information people might have, yay or nay on that, because I'm not sure if it's a good thing or a bad thing. I have suspicions, but I'm trying to weigh everything I can find. If anybody has any input. And short-term rentals. We've had our second meeting with stakeholders and staff on short-term rentals. We're having a public hearing on a new ordinance that would tighten things up for us in terms of business licensing and registering, planning, and zoning. We still have to look at things like enforcement and compliance, which we haven't looked at yet, but we seem to be on board with our Commissioner of Revenue on how to deal with the taxes.
I want to mention the thing that we got the Commissioner of Revenue Association referencing short-term rentals.
Yeah, I got some information today that may
We'll send it.
may conflict with that, but we're I'm not clear exactly at the state level, or we're not clear what we can and can't do yet. So we're trying to get some clarity on that from
Commissioners have something to tinker.
Yes.
Yeah.
One thing that we learned at our stakeholders meeting, you all find this interesting. What part of a short-term stay is taxed? Is it just the lodging night? Is it the cleaning fees? Is the host fee? Which of those items are all taxed? And nobody really knows, and each platform taxes it differently when we got our checks more than likely. And then as we sat there with our stakeholders, they showed how it was calculated, because they auto-calculated for you. It was also different than what, it was. So short answer is that's also some stuff, and our legal counsel said it should, the tax on DOT tax should be on everything, cleaning, host fee, and everything, not just the night they stay. Which might sound contradictory to mindsets, but so stuff like that.
most people, it's one fee.
It's one fee, but your cleaning fees also get taxed, transient occupancy tax too.
Then we had a question, the Airbnb fees people were paying.
You're supposed to pay a tax on that.
Yeah, that was brought up.
That's what you said. It's interesting.
I'd say something that makes I'm very happy to say the ordinance is only as good as your county's ability to enforce it.
Absolutely. So we're so well aware of that,
Thank you.
So
we appreciate
we have a great ordinance in Charlottesville. We just can't enforce it.
kind of like bodies. So like one of the topics is how many people should be in a short-term rental. And recently today, I talked to some other stakeholders about the Albemarle, Augusta, like they'll just say a cap, no more than 8, no more than 9, no more than 6. Even though it could be a 7-bedroom place, okay, yes, no more than 6 people. You can't enforce it. It's kind of like proving how many people live in a long-term rental. I've never been able to go to a judge and say this person lives here, Letters don't necessarily count. Enforcement is definitely a complex thing.
That's it.
Now, next one follow-up question. I heard Fluvanna they're done their salary study. Nelson's is ongoing. Greene's is starting. Can I get a very quick, where's Charlottesville, Louisa, and Albemarle on those studies?
Charlottesville should be completed within 1 to 2 months to be part of this year's budget cycle.
Okay, thank you.
I don't think ours will be done there. Hoping.
So it's ongoing. Louisa, is Louisa conducting a salary study?
Continue.
Ongoing.
As soon as we expect them, they start on the phone calling around to see if somebody else is getting back.
Thank you.
Jim, can I jump in on something? Yes. So something I forgot for my report in regional housing partnership, Annette and I are doing a roadshow to all the jurisdictions. We're gonna start with Greene County on the 13th of December, so be kind to us. We're gonna be doing a roadshow around each one of the jurisdictions and giving about 10, 15 minutes, as much time as you guys will allow us, an overview of the Regional Housing Partnership, maybe a little bit about what this body does. And apparently there's a 50-year anniversary committee, apparently. Jesse and I
Did this over COVID. I remember that.
are part of it. One of the ideas that we're floating around is doing something in the summer where we're gonna do some sort of gathering of all the elected officials and just kind of get them to, because I know in our county, some of our jurisdiction, some of our elected officials don't quite understand what we do here, so we're gonna have an opportunity to do that, because, you know, I can't say hello in 10 minutes, so we probably need a little bit more than that. But please, be kind to us, and we're looking forward to it.
Also, I have been out fundraising, Keith, at the
Yeah.
Regional Housing Partnership.
Yeah.
Tenfold, so much.
I think.
You're welcome. No, you haven't. I hear it's zero.
What, me?
Yeah,
Okay. Car, UVA,
I only hear like a couple $1,000.
really?
Sounds pretty weak.
All right, this can go on for like that. Our next meeting is in February, so I hope everyone enjoys the holidays and happy new year. We have some new members, if we have to switch over in January, so there'll be some orientation. You can see kind of a preview as to what will be happening in February, but
Do we have any switch over?
That's when changes. The boards typically assign the liaison appointments.
Right.
So you could.
Right.
Make no elections.
and with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So good.
All right, all in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Have a good evening, everyone.
All right, Christine, could you tell us who did what house?
Say that again?
Could you tell us who did what?